This is a review of my third Leica lens. This is the Leica Apo Macro Elmarit TL 60mm f2.8 a spherical lens. And before that I had the 35mm Summilux 1.4 and the 18mm Elmarit 2.8. I wanted something with a longer focal length for my third lens purchase to do portrait shots, and this one also has a macro function, so that was a bonus also. On my crop sensor camera, the Leica CL, this lens has an equivalent focal length of 90 millimeters. Right now I have a 90mm, 50mm, and 28mm prime lenses. This one has a lens hood just like my 35mm lens, and I'll just compare the size of these two. The 35mm is actually more compact, but it's heavier in weight. The diameter is about the same, but they both feel very solid still and very high quality. This one has a couple scratches already. I accidentally dropped this a couple days after I purchased it, so I have a scratch there and there and right there. But for this video I'll show some sample photos and do a comparison about how the photos compare with the 35mm and the 18mm. And then I'll show some macro shots at the end also to give a comparison about how these photographs look. But in general, I think the photographs are very high quality and almost the same quality in comparison to the 35mm lens. It's just a different focal length, and this one also has the macro capability. Here are the sample photos for my 60mm lens. This first one is just to give you an idea of the field of view of this lens. So it's fairly constricted field of view. I would have gotten a wider shot if I used a shorter focal length. But this one I'm going to compare the 60mm with the 35mm lens. This is standing in the same position. With the 60mm you get a constricted field of view, but again here in the standing in the same spot with the 35mm lens you get a wider shot and a wider field of view. So the 35 is equivalent to the 50mm. I'm going to do three comparisons here, the 28 field of view versus the 50 versus the 90. This one was with my 18mm lens, and here you get a fairly wide field of view of the birdhouse and the house behind that. You can imagine that birdhouse is a face, so you do get some distortion of the face if you're shooting portraits. If you look at the roof, on the front part of the roof is an exaggerated largeness compared to the back of the roof. So the next one is my 35mm Summilux. So I stepped back a few steps to try to keep the birdhouse the same size. So you notice the background is a tighter field of view and a lot more blurriness in the background. But because this is a 35 millimeter focal length and a 1.8 aperture. And then the third one, I stepped back even further and kept the birdhouse the same size. So there's really no distortion on the proportions of the birdhouse at all. The background is an even tighter field of view, but the blurriness is about the same compared to my 35 millimeter lens. So the quality is about the same, but again, just a tighter field of view. So I'll go through those again quicker. So the 28 millimeter field of view, wider field of view, less blurriness, more distortion. The 50 millimeter focal length, more blurriness, tighter field of view, less distortion. And finally the 90 millimeter again, an even tighter shot and no distortion of the birdhouse. So here's some close-up pictures of some flowers. It has a nice color reproduction. The flower in the front is focused, it's blurred in the back. And here's a macro shot of my headphones, and this has a nice sharpness too, and very blurred out in the back. And the next one is another macro shot. I focused on the Rolex crown insignia on the dial, and other parts are blurry, but I think this came out pretty nice, so I'll try to do more images like these of my other watches. So here's how the lens looks on the camera body. It is pretty big and heavy on the camera, especially with the lens hood on, but I'll take the lens hood off. I don't use that all the time. But on my camera I did purchase the hand grip, which was extra, and the thumbs up, which gives me better solid grip, and it's easier to use the camera with this bigger lens. But so far I like how the pictures turned out with this lens. I do a lot of portrait shots, so I'm using this lens just about as much as I'm using my 35 millimeter lens. But this one is fairly expensive. It was $32.95 from the Leica store, but I do recommend this lens if you're thinking about it. I did think about getting the 75 millimeter SL lens, which would have given me an even longer focal length, but that was even more expensive than this one. But I think I'm getting pretty good results with this one. I'm still upset about the little scratches that are on the camera lens body when I dropped it, but I don't know how to get those scratches off. So I'm just going to hide those scratches there. But I do like the option of doing macro photos, so I'll be doing some more of those and experimenting with the macro photographs. So if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. Thanks.